All right, Vince is going to get started, and thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Take that one. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. So actually, this trying to set up my screen is a good way to segue into the title of my presentation, which is chaos. Yeah. Thank you for the help from the fine team here, and I really want to say thank you to the organizers for putting on such a great conference. I've had a lot of fun, and I think I'm the last session for today, so I know everyone's excited to go off to happy hour, so I'll try to be as thorough but as quick as possible. So yeah, my name is Vince Mahan, and as I said, I'm really excited to be here today. I'm here to talk about something that I think anyone who's worked in QA has experienced once, but probably commonly in your career, and that is chaos and quality. Um, it seems like for me, I've spent the majority of my career leading QA teams in small but scaling startups. So it's been really interesting to just sort of observe and listen to some of the thought leaders here today who come from much larger organizations. Because what I'm about to talk about comes from the perspective of like very small, scrappy teams that are forced to do a lot with little resources. But yeah, so the idea is that there's chaos pretty much is inherent within QA, and what I'm here to talk about today is how you can navigate out of that chaos using a framework that's helped me throughout my career. So I'm going to just dive in. So yes, I'm based in Portland, Oregon. As I mentioned, I've spent about at least 10 years in various leadership roles at small startups. I'm currently a technical account manager at Mabel, where I help some of our largest enterprise customers navigate complex quality transformations using our unified testing platform. Um, but during my QA career, I found that the greatest challenge that I've faced hasn't always been chasing test coverage or release deadlines. It's been changing the culture of quality at organizations. Because change is really hard, and I found that overcoming it requires, really political. It's very political. You have to really be able to change the hearts and minds. So I really want to just really explain how navigating these challenges can be difficult, but there's a way out. So I'm going to dive into that now. So the roadmap for our conversation, I really just want to talk about and define what chaos looks like. And then from there, we're going to explore the three pillars of quality, which I see as culture, process, and tooling. And the three of those need to work together in order to have a really successful QA practice. And so, as I said, I want to start on a positive note. Anyone in QA can make change. It can feel daunting, but you don't have to have a leadership title. Anyone is capable of driving real change, regardless of their role. And the key things to focus on small wins that quickly build momentum, and from there you'll be able to show what you can do. But I really want to start about talking about what chaos and what it looks like. Raise your hand if you want someone to quickly shout out what they think chaos looks like in QA. Anyone in the front want to give a quick sort of example of something you've experienced in your career? Yeah.
Um, when like five monitors are running seven different matchmakings and you're trying to get in the same thing.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just large scale change that gets checked at the
Last minute.
yeah, end of your dev cycle.
Dev cycle. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Trying to meet a deadline, your manager says increase the resources, but the resources don't know what to do.
Yeah, so it's definitely it comes in many different shapes and forms of what chaos can look like. But in my opinion, I see chaos as it refers to a state where QA processes, cultures, and tools are fragmented, inconsistent, and reactive rather than strategic and aligned. I guess I say reactive is the key word where I know I've spent most of my QA career. We tried in our best interest to be as proactive as possible, but at the end of the day, like as you've mentioned, there's deadlines, and you have to get out, regardless, and that's when the bugs really get through the cracks. And as we know, real chaos is more common than most of us would like to admit. And we've all experienced it firsthand. But let me just tell you how I actually got into QA. I think it's the best way to define chaos, and that is I actually started out in customer support, and it was a small startup, about 13 people, and we just signed our big customer, and we were migrating their existing platform over to our system. And I'll never forget it because it was Super Bowl, the day after Super Bowl. And my CEO texted me and said, Vince, have you seen what Zendesk looks like today? And I said, no, let me check and see. There were 27,000 Zendesk tickets. 27,000 that came in overnight because of a bad migration. I had not worked in QA at that point in time, and the CEO says, he says, Vince, I need you to hop on the next flight to San Francisco. We're having a war room. We have got to figure this out. We don't want to lose this customer for something going bad. And so I was out there for almost a month, trying to we had to get a series of temps. Everyone, all hands on deck, was trying to figure out all the various issues that caused this problem. Thankfully, we were able to get it resolved, but it was just something simple with not having QA and just having 27,000 different instances of people reaching out to you, yelling at you. It was a portfolio tracker, so people were using it to track their money. So they were very passionate about it. So it's just something to think about. That for me was my first experience into chaos and what it looked like, and that launched my QA career. And so you probably can't see this all very well, but there are many different things that would define chaos. And like someone mentioned, it's manual testing that lags behind development. Everyone's working really hard, but they're not sure if it's paying off. I'm sure maybe some of us have been there before. But it's when releases get blocked by the last minute issues, or when regression cycles can drag on for days, maybe even weeks sometimes, or when decisions are made on gut instead of data. So we're in silos and turnover, skipping tests, all of these things can add to the mess. But this is exactly the type of chaos that I'm aiming to fix. So again, in another real world example, I'll be brief since I lost a lot of time earlier. But when I was a new QA leader at a new small but scaling startup, the platform was 10 years old. It was riddled with tech debt. There was no existing automation in place. There was maybe a little bit that the developers were doing because they were so desperate to collect feedback. But in the staff that I had inherited, they were all manual testers. They didn't know how to code. It was taking 120 hours to perform manual regression. And the leader that hired me said, Vince, job number one is to figure out how do we stop QA from being a bottleneck? How can we bring some form of automation in here? And because it's slowing down getting our new products to market. And so, what I did there was, really went out and did some experiments and tried to figure out, okay, what can we do? Because there was just all kinds of issues were going on. There was very little unit tests that developers were doing. No one was talking to each other. Again, it was completely chaotic. But you can talk about how much of a pain it can be to work in those type of environments. But I really want to talk about the financial impact that happens when there's chaos in your organization. Chaos doesn't just frustrate teams. It impacts your bottom line, as you all know. Bugs that reach production cost exponentially more to fix than those that are caught earlier in development. They disrupt the customer experience. They erode your brand trust, and this turns chaos to a direct financial risk that businesses need to overcome. As I mentioned in my last example, slower time to market. Chaos can delay releases, which blocks revenue opportunities. It gives your competitors an edge over you. As delivery cycles slow, teams spend more time fixing than innovating. And, in our industry, we know speed equals survival, and these delays put your business at risk. And finally, it's a loss in trust. Chaos erodes trust at every level. Leaders start to question QA's value. They disengage. Teams start to disengage, and bugs slip through production. Today, especially with the current macroeconomic conditions, tightening budgets and developers increasing influence on quality, and AI, of course, we talked a lot about that today. AI is reshaping our roles. So it's more important than ever for QA to prove their value to leaders, or risk being sidelined, or to be dramatic, maybe becoming extinct. Although I don't think that's going to happen, but it's a hard time in QA. So what can we do to make things better? I think I've established what chaos looks like. You've all seen it. But how can QA teams get back on track? Too often we think more test coverage equals less chaos. But chaos is cultural and systemic. You escape chaos by aligning your people, process, and tools so they work together and not in silos. And to be successful, quality needs to be a team sport. And this is where I want to introduce the 3 pillars of quality. This is important where they come in: cultural, process, and tools. Each pillar, it plays a critical role in moving from firefighting to confidence. We're going to talk about each of these in greater detail in a moment. But one thing is clear, is you need alignment across all 3 to escape chaos. So one thing that, when I talk about culture, and process. Sometimes it's actually not always. All right, there you go. Sometimes it's not always clear to people, so I want to briefly explain. Culture equals what actually happens. It's your team's norms, your attitudes, the power dynamics, the attitudes, trust or lack thereof. On the other hand, process is what's documented. So if you think of it this way, a good process won't work in a toxic culture, but a great culture can survive a bad process. Culture shapes how or if a process is followed. And process is important, but culture is number one if you want to be successful. Believe it or not, I've always found that tooling is the easy part, but I'll get to that in a minute. But here's an example of what it looks like in QA. QA getting looped in too late, skipping root cause analysis as a team, ignored test failures, bugs that get filed but never discussed. These are the cultural problems that block process from actually working. All right, so now I want to introduce a framework that's helped me throughout my career to transform quality in teams. It consists of 6 key steps. It starts with doubt, moving to observation, small experiments, consistency, credibility, and then finally adoption. I'm going to walk you through this and show you how it applies to QA. This is a very simple framework. It's practical, but it's powerful. You start with doubt. When something feels off, ask the tough questions that others might avoid. Don't settle for surface level answers. Then you're going to move on to observation. You're going to get curious. You're going to dive into the details and the root causes behind the constant firefighting, the failures. This is where you uncover what's really driving the chaos in your organization. Next, you're going to take a few small experiments. You're going to start simple. These are going to be low risk, high learning changes that are quick to implement and easy to measure. These small wins build momentum. And from there, you're going to look for signs of consistency. You're going to find things that are repeatable. And then you're going to reinforce what works and build trust by doing this over and over again, doing it reliably. And you're going to prove that to people that these work rather than offering big promises that don't ever pan out. Finally, you're going to get to credibility. You're going to let the results speak for themselves. You solve real problems and make an impact. When you do that, people start to trust you and they start to listen. Importantly, they'll give you a seat at the table in the decision-making process. And finally, you're going to get to adoption. Change becomes contagious. People see it working and they want in as well. And they want to be a part of it. And that's when the real transformation happens. This framework is how you move from chaos to confidence one step at a time. Now let's dive into the first pillar that I mentioned earlier, culture, which is the most important. I know it's probably hard to see. It's hard for me to see up here. I gave 3 specific examples. I encourage you, I know they're going to share this deck afterwards, but I'm going to focus on one since we're short on time. And that is that one refers to the 3rd example down here, and it's when leadership doesn't see QA's value. When that happens, it's all about changing the narrative. And so I've always found in my career, when you're talking to executives, you have to speak their language. That's usually focusing on money or ROI, return on investment. So what I've done is I've started quantifying wins. So for example, I'll show how automated tests might prevent rework or speed up delivery, cut down on regression activities. I'm going to bring real numbers to the table, like reduced cycle times, staff hours saved on regression, or improving the fewer escape defects. When leaders start to see how quality saves time and money, they start recognizing QA as a strategic driver of business value instead of a cost center. Next, I want to talk about the process pillar very quickly. Specifically, shifting left with quality gates. Process is where we build predictability. Shifting left means catching issues earlier before they become bigger problems down the line. Here's how the framework applies to it. First, you're going to ask, why do we keep finding critical bugs late in the cycle? That's a sign we're testing too late. You might see that unit tests exist, but they're not consistent, and QA feedback starts too late. Try adding a lightweight quality gate in your CI/CD pipeline to catch issues before merging code in. You're going to integrate these gates into every pull request and make them part of your team's definition of done. Teams start reporting fewer surprises at release time, better test coverage, and immediate feedback for developers. Devs start writing better unit tests. QA is engaged earlier, and quality becomes part of every commit, just not at the end. Doing things like this is how process transformation builds confidence by making quality more predictable. Yes, I'm short on time. All right, yeah, I know we had some issues earlier, so I'm going to speed through this one in tooling. Again, a few other examples. We're going to ask, why are your test failures hard to diagnose? Might not see that you have good logging in place. And so you can do a couple of quick experiments by enhancing the logging, tying them to business context, and making it so that it's easier to debug test failures. And from there, QA and dev will start relying on logs to drive root cause analysis, which will then speed up your team's velocity as a result. So when culture, process, and tools are all working together, you get better results. You get more team efficiency, better job satisfaction for those who are working on the team, and you're able to increase throughput for your engineering team. So when these processes are aligned with the tools and the culture, there's fewer silos, and QA becomes a multiplier for innovation. I've seen teams that don't take these proactive measures, they're stuck in chaos forever firefighting. So the story I told earlier about when I inherited an old platform with 10 years old, 120 hours to do regression activities, there's actually a happy ending for that story. It wasn't just one thing, but a combination of technical changes, process improvements, and cultural shifts that allowed us to get out of that hole. Largely doing small experiments from the framework I discussed earlier, we were able to actually move our feature coverage from near 0% to 95% in a matter of 6 months. We reduced regression testing from 120 hours to just 56 minutes. It really allowed us to scale our organization and really enhance quality. But before we go, I do want to talk about something that I help work on using that framework, but taking it a step further, and some of the work that I do with Mabel, and that's where I want to introduce the Software Quality Maturity Assessment. This is a tool that you can actually take home with you. In a minute, I'm going to share a QR code where you can take it, but this tool focuses on the same 3 pillars we discussed: culture, people, and process. It's a survey consisting of 29 different questions, and it's something that we just didn't create in a vacuum. It's something that we had very in-depth conversations with different teams that are looking to scale their QA practices, companies like Slack, Fox, JetBlue, and others. And once we started looking at how they're measuring their team, so we decided to put together this questionnaire. And it's going to get you to a point once you can go and take this survey yourself. It's going to give you output and allow you to see where you stand on these 3 pillars. And from there, you can actually start using it as a conversation to drive change and have those hard conversations with your teams. So I'm going to hold this up here for a second. That's the QR code that will link to the Software Quality Maturity Assessment. I really encourage you to take a look and provide any feedback. And I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to wrap it up very quickly.
Before we do questions, there will be closing remarks and one other session on the schedule.
Yeah.
And I also, this is Vince Mahan from Mabel.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the intro because we were so behind.
Yeah. So okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does anybody have any burning questions? We could do 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Once again, it's Vince from Mabel.